It's the first time they're going live nationally around the globe. I'm Amy Goodman, but we're going to start in Vermont. The Vermont Legislature made history on Tuesday by becoming the first in the nation to vote in favor of gay marriage. Vermont lawmakers had voted for a same-sex marriage bill last week, but it was short of a veto-overriding majority, and Governor Jim Douglas vetoed the bill on Monday. But on Tuesday, enough House members switched sides to override the veto and voted 100 to 49 to make gay marriage legal. House Speaker Shap Smith announced the final tally to resounding applause.
Please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yes, 100. Those voting no, 49. 100 needed to pass. You have voted to override the veto. The House will come to order.
Vermont is now the fourth state in the country to recognize gay marriage. Massachusetts, Connecticut, and as of last week, Iowa achieved this through court rulings. Vermont is the first to do so through legislative action. In 2000, Vermont was the first state to adopt civil unions for same-sex couples. I'm joined now by two guests in Burlington, Vermont. Beth Robinson is a lawyer and board chair of the Vermont Freedom to Marry Task Force and Action Committee. Bill Lippert is a Vermont state legislator, the chair of the Vermont House Judiciary Committee, a longtime gay rights activist. They've been at the forefront of the struggle to legalize gay marriage in Vermont. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Well, let's start with Bill Lippert. How did you feel yesterday in the legislature in Vermont when this history-making override took place?
Well, it was, I was ecstatic and frankly moved to tears. The vote was so close, and the chamber was filled with so many supporters and some opponents, but it was just a moment of real joy and great emotion to have finally achieved marriage equality in Vermont after all the years of working toward this.
Talk about how the struggle began in the state legislature. I mean, it's interesting. Vermont was the first to approve civil unions, and yet that seems passé now.
How quickly civil unions became the conservative alternative to full marriage equality. As a number of us have said, in 2000, creating civil unions, in my view, was bold and courageous. When we weren't able to achieve full marriage equality, there simply weren't the votes. There simply, in my view, hadn't been yet enough opportunity to have the conversation with enough Vermonters. I think the civil unions changed the landscape of our country by creating the first legal recognition for gay and lesbian couples in the country. But I'll credit Beth and the Vermont Freedom to Marry group for really carrying forward the message, the ongoing message for Vermont over the past 10 years. And we in the legislature continued to work toward this achievement, but it was really the grassroots movement of the Vermont Freedom to Marry Task Force and others who continued the conversation all throughout the state. And that was demonstrated by the fact that when we went to introduce the marriage equality bill in the House this year, I think we had 59 co-sponsors, which was an extraordinary achievement, given that in 2000, in an amendment to try to enact full marriage, I believe there were 22 votes on the floor in 2000. So going from 22 votes to 59 co-sponsors was a dramatic achievement. And even the passage of the bill with 95 to 52, way more than a majority in the House, was tremendous. Of course, the override was
Bill,
best.
What does marriage provide that civil unions don't provide?
Well, clearly, marriage provides access to the institution of marriage, which has deep, deep meaning. And again, Beth has articulated this so many times, and I feel some ways like an echo of what I've heard Beth articulate, but it's really true that for couples who are in a civil union, nevertheless, having access to the institution of marriage really brings the sense of full equality. In addition, there are tangible legal benefits in some circumstances, but also the access to the possibility of all the federal benefits, which really are not accessible until we have marriage and can then challenge the federal government's failure to provide those benefits.
Beth Robinson, as you sit next to Bill Lippert, you were yesterday in the Legislature in Vermont. Talk about the whole movement that you really have been a leader of over these years, how it began and how it culminated in yesterday's vote.
You know, we founded an organization called Vermont Freedom to Marry Task Force in 1995. And at the time, it really was designed to kind of lay the groundwork for a lawsuit. I'm an attorney, and along with my law partner Susan Murray and Mary Bonato from Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, we were planning to bring a marriage case in Vermont, which we did in 1997. So the organizing was really to try to do some education and political work around that. The Baker case resulted in kind of a mixed decision because the court recognized that our laws were unconstitutional, but it stopped short of addressing this ultimate question of whether we have a legally protected right to be married, and instead said at a minimum we have a legally protected right to all the tangible bundle of benefits that come with marriage, and it kind of set aside for a later day this ultimate question. So in 2000, when we ended up with the civil union law, which was obviously monumental at the time, I think a lot of us felt proud and joyful, but also a sense of unfinished business, in a sense that we had moved the country forward, but at the same time we had been complicit in introducing this notion of a separate track, and we celebrated it at the time. And I think for some of us that always felt a little bit, we were ambivalent about that and felt that we needed to keep moving forward and move beyond that. And I think it served a purpose in 2000, but it had come to outlive its usefulness.
So Beth, explain what happened this weekend. I mean, Bill was just explaining that, yes, it was a major victory last week when the House, the Vermont House, joined with the Senate in voting for gay marriage. But the governor had made clear in the midst of the vote, which did seem unusual, that he was going to veto it. You still had to now get 5 votes even though you were at 95, you had to make your way to 100. How did you accomplish this over the weekend to override the governor's veto? And how significant is this? What, the first time in 19 years that a Vermont governor had a vote overridden?
Well, fortunately, actually we only needed 3 votes because the first vote was 95 to 52, but there was a rep who was absent who came the next day. So we had 96 reps who had voted, and then we knew the speaker would be an affirmative vote. So it wasn't quite as challenging. But the fact is, an override vote is a different vote. It's a slightly different dynamic. You're not being asked to vote on the merits of the underlying question. There's a different significance. And I think for a number of the representatives, especially in the wake of the Iowa decision, I think it really drove home the inevitability of full equality for same-sex couples. And people realized that if the veto were sustained, gay and lesbian Vermonters weren't going to go away, and we weren't going to stop asking to be treated equally. And to the extent that folks felt that this was a valuable conversation, but were anxious to move on and move forward and put it behind us, I think the urge to closure was a real factor that helped bring some people over on the override.
How did Prop 8 in California affect this vote? And explain what Proposition 8 was.
You know, I think Proposition 8, where the voters in California overturned the Supreme Court's decision allowing same-sex couples to marry in California, was a real wake-up call to us here in Vermont. And I think it really helped motivate our people in the field. And I don't just mean sort of the hardcore, usual suspects. I think there was a ripple through kind of mainstream, not as political America to see for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, civil rights moving backwards, people having rights and losing them. And I think it really shook us out of the temptation to complacency, and I think lent a greater sense of urgency to our work here in Vermont, because we felt, and I still feel, that the path to undoing Prop 8 really ran right through Vermont. And we're hopeful that in addition to providing equal rights for gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender Vermonters right here at home, we're hopeful that we've done our part to try to shift the tide back in the right direction on a national basis.
Bill Lippert, you were once the only openly gay House rep in Vermont. Now you are among a number. How did that change things for you and for the Vermont legislature? In a moment after break, we're going to talk to a 12-year-old girl who testified on behalf of her lesbian parents, talking about what a difference it would make if they could marry. But it's the personal experience of